Thank you for having us. Congratulations to IT on 25 years. And I think that's a massive contribution that we've had to have in front of us to build on. A really rich, deep and wide discussion on the speakers before me. And so I'll just try to connect some of those things and answer your question there, Bela. So I'll start with some of uh, our experience with ground level design and implementation on some of the things that Pranav mentioned about and Armando also talked about. So with the support of partners like the World Bank and FCDO, what we've been trying to do is think about the reality of Pakistan in terms of digital and the divide that exists. And while we can start and think about how to bridge that divide, the reality is that that divide will stay and be a constant for at least some time, because there are structural changes required to bridge that divide in a way that will enable us to have universal access to technology and technology-enabled education. So one of the things that we've been working on is redesigning and adapting instruments like EGRA, EGMA, and ASER, and see how they could be converted into low-cost and low-tech solutions for carrying out assessments. And the other lens that's been discussed quite at length is how to get parents involved in this. And given the age group that we're dealing with, access to technology independently is a challenge. And especially at the kind of socioeconomic tiers where this problem is widely clustered. So what we've done is try to use channels like SMS, which does not require internet and can work on basic phones. Phone calls, again, based on some of the experience and evidence from COVID in other countries, could be a very potent tool. And then really using WhatsApp voice messages and text messages at the low end of the spectrum, where high internet connectivity or interactive devices are not a challenge. And we've had some really interesting but mixed results. And so, for example, the SMS only based model on the limited piloting that we did not work. And so primarily because reading text and then replying to those assessment questions through parents is complex for children, is not a great and optimized experience. Phone calls could be potentially really interesting, but are relatively high cost and don't offer that kind of scalability. And again, some of the things that MindSpark has been working on, we're trying to see how to make that work here and offer a lot of insights. But the more important thing was the challenge around designing and implementing something like this at scale. And the kind of challenges that we faced were phones and access to devices is largely through fathers. And they're not home all day. And so what is an optimal time for carrying out an assessment through parents when access at home is a time limited enabler? The other thing that, again, because we weren't focusing on large scale assessments and really thinking about that gap that exists between what happens in the classroom until the point we have results on a large scale assessment, was to have this makeshift tracker or live ECG of learning outcomes for parents and teachers alike. And so how do we substitute formative assessments in a more structured way that has both the sort of connections and linkages to schools and institutions, but also parents in terms of assessing and supporting performance. And so things like understanding if parents know what the children would have been taught in school today, what their SLOs were, what they should have covered, what kind of homework they're getting, right down to can parents support conducting these assessments at home, and then using those results and understanding them. And as you pointed out, we see a huge disconnect in both some of the non-state research that has been done on understanding how parents perceive and understand education outcomes. But also the National Achievement Test that Dr. Suraya talked about also highlights that disconnect. And so connecting all of this to technology and evidence, I think the scale of the problem that we face and the diversity of the context in which that problem situates, there is no version of reality, in my point of view, where technology is not a necessary and critical enabler, but how that works is something we have to figure out. And so a lot of effort and thinking will have to go into design. It will have to be tailored to the different needs of segments that we want to service and beneficiaries that we want to bridge this delta for. And so that essentially means that one solution is not going to work, and just having large scale assessments is not the only solution. So we'll have to work with no tech options, we'll have to work with low tech options, we'll have to tech with mid-end and high-end options based on access and availability. And this could be one of the hooks for thinking about digital transformation at the economy and the society level, where enablement is really key. Again, access to internet and services and the digital literacy part of this is as real for a lot of the target groups as is for other countries. And so tackling that is going to be really important. What parents can do to help has been a key area of interest for us, and just trying to understand some of the things. Isa just posted about the GAP report, and one of the findings is that parents could be one of the stakeholders in the ecosystem that are often underrepresented in terms of the learning journey and the process, but could play a huge role. And I think just engaging them is really important. That again, we have to think about differently, because we have a huge cohort of first generation learners where parents are not necessarily equipped or enabled to offer the kind of support that would be required at home. Especially given the catch-up that we have to play. And so, again, some of the research that we've been conducting in the space tells us that parents are super interested and keen on helping children. What they don't understand is how they can do it and what they really need to do. And so trying to make it simpler for them, trying to adapt for and essentially think around local language, local context, the drivers and motivators is really key. And technology offers us a playground that can help us bridge and connect a lot of these different elements in a fairly dynamic way. The most critical part of, again, doing all of this using technology, carrying out assessments at different tiers and levels, is the data and evidence that comes out of this. And I think that's the part that we don't have to miss or overlook. If we can't use assessments and design actions and then track them in the next round of assessments, then this entire exercise does not yield the dividends that we expect or want it to yield. And I think just the urgency of how this needs to happen means that a lot of really interactive and responsive decision making in terms of what assessments tell us, what kind of data we generate from these platforms can be fed back into learning environments, whether in school or out of school. And I think both will be equally important. And in cases where parents can't offer the direct support, the evolution to how communities can be mobilized and engaged will be really essential. And just in terms of AI, because it's the new thing that everyone wants to focus on, I think, again, we'll have to think really about how it can be tailored and contextualized to Pakistan. And the two tiers that could be really catalytic and help accelerate some of these things are how to bridge the kind of more macro issues we have, like literacy barriers, like local language barriers, and get the teachers and the parents on a much steeper curve of how to understand the learning gaps and how to provide support through these platforms. I'll just stop here, cognizant of time and leaving room some questions. But thank you, Bela, and the other colleagues for having me.